Welcome to Decades of Darkness, where we take you on a chronological journey through the most compelling and chilling true crime cases spanning from the 19th century to the present day. Content warning: this video discusses sensitive topics including domestic violence and child neglect, based on historical records. Viewer discretion is advised.
The year is 1877. In the isolated farming communities of America, life was often harsh, unforgiving, and brutally private. News traveled slowly, carried by handwritten letters and local newspapers that often brought tales stranger and sometimes far darker than fiction. This is one such story. Our journey takes us to a small, unassuming village in Wisconsin, 12 miles south of La Crosse, a place called Chaseburg. Here, in the quiet rhythms of rural life, a truly horrifying case of cruelty and neglect was about to be unearthed. A story so disturbing it would shock the sensibilities of even a hardened 19th century community. It begins with a man named Carl Walland. Around 4 years prior to this article being published in the Manitowoc Tribune, Walland and his wife had settled on a ridge just 2 miles from Chaseburg. The records paint a stark picture of Carl, a rough character, quick to abuse his wife, and so obnoxious to his few neighbors that they wanted nothing to do with him. During their first year there, as his wife approached childbirth, Carl Walland committed an act of unimaginable cruelty. He drove her from their home, forcing her out into the cold, unforgiving elements. It was there, amidst the rough comfort of a straw stack, that she gave birth to their child. But the ordeal was far from over. With the newborn in her arms, she sought refuge back in her own home, only to be refused admission by her brutal husband. Desperate, she found what little shelter she could in the granary. And there, alone and suffering, she gave birth to a second child, a twin. In the harrowing days that followed, due to this unfathomable neglect and exposure, tragedy struck again. One of the fragile newborns succumbed to the harsh conditions and died. And soon after, the mother, too, perished, leaving behind one tiny, sickly infant, a child whose short life would be marked by suffering, under the care of a man devoid of compassion. Walland, seemingly unaffected by the deaths of his wife and one child, soon married again. His surviving infant, the one born in the granary, remained sickly. As the years passed, that child, a girl, lived a life of absolute misery. Despite being 2 years old, the child was so neglected and weak that she had never learned to walk. The newspaper account paints a devastating picture of what happened inside that isolated home. The child lay in a crib, sometimes wallowing in filth for a week at a time, a ghost of a toddler slowly fading away. Then, just 1 month after Walland's new wife gave birth to their own baby, the suffering of the first wife's child finally ended. On a bleak Monday, the surviving toddler succumbed to her torment. The cause of death was simple, tragic, and absolutely unforgivable: starvation and neglect. Carl Walland's immediate action was not remorse, but secrecy. He buried the child clandestinely, at night, in the local burying ground, attempting to hide the evidence of his crime. But in a small, tight-knit community like Chaseburg, a fresh grave never goes unnoticed. The sight of the newly disturbed earth immediately raised suspicions among the neighbors. They had long known Walland was a brutal and obnoxious character, and this secretive act confirmed their worst fears. They confronted him. Under interrogation, he quickly admitted that his child had died and that he had buried the body himself under the cover of darkness. The community acted swiftly. The sheriff was called, and the body was exhumed. A coroner's jury was summoned, and the local physician's statement was undeniable. The final verdict landed like a hammer blow. The child had been starved to death. The truth was now public. No arrests had yet been made. But the article ends with a stark warning that reveals the raw, frontier justice simmering beneath the surface. The local neighbors were so enraged that if Walland was not arrested the next day, they threatened to lynch him. A community had just discovered a murderer in their midst, and the clock was ticking.